Imagine a place so remote, so high above the clouds that for centuries it barely registered on any map. A land where the wind cuts sharper than any blade, where snow covers the peaks for most of the year, and where the air is so thin that every breath feels like a fight. Welcome to the Pomeir Plateau, a frozen, windswept expanse rising more than 4,000 meters above sea level. Locals and explorers alike call it the roof of the world. For centuries, this plateau was forgotten. Too harsh to farm, too rugged to build on, and too distant to defend, it was simply ignored. Maps passed over it, and historians rarely mentioned it. But the quiet of the Pomeir Plateau was deceptive. Beneath its icy surface lies something that has transformed this forgotten land into one of the most strategically important regions on Earth. For centuries, the Pomeir Plateau seemed like a place no one wanted. Its jagged peaks were too steep to farm, the cold too harsh for permanent settlements, and the terrain too rugged to build roads or cities. For most of modern history, it was simply a blank spot on the map, a forgotten corner of the world where only the hardiest travelers dared to tread. But everything changed in the 21st century. In a move that barely made international headlines, a portion of this plateau was peacefully returned to China from Tajikistan. No armies marched across the mountains, no ultimatums were issued, just careful diplomacy, signatures on a piece of paper, and a quiet transfer of land. At first glance, it seemed like a minor border adjustment, the kind of bureaucratic footnote most people scroll past. But beneath the ice, the plateau held secrets that would rewrite its significance. Geological surveys soon revealed massive deposits of lithium, rare earth minerals, and even gold. Suddenly, the Pomeir Plateau, once dismissed as useless, became one of the most strategically valuable regions on Earth. From forgotten wasteland to geopolitical prize, the stage was set for a story of patience, planning, and hidden wealth. A story that stretches back thousands of years. To understand why the Pomeir Plateau matters so much today, we need to travel back more than 2,000 years, to the age of the Silk Road. The plateau wasn't always forgotten. In fact, it was a critical passageway connecting China to Central Asia, the Middle East, and eventually Europe. Caravans loaded with silk, spices, and precious stones braved icy mountain passes to reach new markets. Envoys, traders, and monks moved through the region, exchanging not just goods, but ideas, culture, and diplomacy. One famous example is the Chinese envoy Zhang Qian, who journeyed westward through these highlands during the Western Han Dynasty. His mission was to establish diplomatic ties, but it also laid the groundwork for China's influence across Central Asia. Later, during the Tang Dynasty, China established the Anqi Protectorate in the region, a small outpost designed to secure trade routes and safeguard Chinese interests. Controlling these high mountain passes meant controlling the flow of commerce and information, giving whoever held the plateau a powerful advantage in regional politics. In many ways, the Pomeir Plateau was like the ancient world's busiest airport hub, only instead of airplanes, it was caravans and horses, and instead of terminals, it was treacherous mountain passes. This historical significance explains why, even today, China sees the plateau not just as land, but as a strategic link to Central Asia and beyond. The Pomeir Plateau isn't just impressive for its altitude or scenery. Its high mountain passes have been a key strategic asset for centuries. Whoever controlled these peaks controlled the flow of goods, ideas, and influence across Central Asia. In the ancient world, a single pass could determine which empire profited from trade, who received timely intelligence, and even which alliances held strong. Think of it like a major highway today. If you control the highway connecting several major cities, you can influence commerce, monitor traffic, and secure your interests. The plateau's passes acted in the same way, only in a far more challenging environment of ice, rock, and extreme weather. For empires like the Han and Tang dynasties, maintaining presence here wasn't just about profit. It was about survival, influence, and regional dominance. Losing the plateau meant more than losing land. It meant losing a gateway to Central Asia, a chance to shape the region, and centuries of hard-won strategic advantage. By understanding the plateau's high passes, we see why this harsh, seemingly useless land has been at the center of global strategy for thousands of years, and why today modern nations still see it as a critical piece of the geopolitical puzzle. By the 19th century, the story of the Pomeir Plateau took a dramatic turn. China, once a dominant power with influence stretching across Central Asia, was now a nation in decline. The Qing dynasty faced rebellions at home, widespread corruption, and mounting pressure from European powers. Britain controlled India, Russia was expanding southward, and China's attention was pulled in 1,000 directions. Caught in this storm, the plateau slipped from China's grasp almost without a fight. In 1864, China signed the Treaty of Tarbagattai with Tsarist Russia. On paper, it was a simple boundary agreement. In reality, it was a massive territorial loss. Over 440,000 square kilometers ceded to Moscow's control. The treaty didn't explicitly hand over the Pomeir Plateau, but it left China's claim weak, vague, and vulnerable. By 1892, Russian troops occupied over 1,100 kilometers of the eastern plateau. China's response? Practically nothing. There were no battles, no uprisings, no dramatic protests, just quiet resignation. A dotted line on a map marked what was once a vital, strategic land. For decades, this highland vanished from Chinese governance, slipping into a period of neglect and obscurity. This strategic silence wasn't merely political. It was a consequence of China's weakened state. Losing the plateau didn't make headlines, but it left a void that would echo for more than a century. It was a quiet defeat, one that shaped the way China would think about borders, diplomacy, and long-term strategy for generations to come. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the Pomeir Plateau became part of a newly independent Tajikistan. But this wasn't a straightforward inheritance. The region was rugged, remote, and economically fragile. Even flat, arable land in Tajikistan was struggling under the weight of civil war and limited infrastructure. Now, imagine trying to govern steep, glaciated mountains where roads were scarce. Winter temperatures could drop below minus 30 degrees Celsius, and access to electricity or clean water was minimal. During Soviet control, the plateau had been militarized, with observation posts and border patrols, but it was never developed for civilian life. After independence, Tajikistan inherited not only a challenging landscape but also a border that was vaguely defined and difficult to patrol. The country had more immediate priorities: rebuilding after civil conflict, stabilizing its economy, and providing basic services to its citizens. Meanwhile, China quietly watched from the sidelines. Unlike Tajikistan, China had resources, administrative capacity, and a historical connection to the plateau. The timing was perfect for a strategic, low-conflict approach. With Tajikistan's focus elsewhere, Beijing could begin planning its return to a land that had once been central to its influence. This context explains why a peaceful, negotiated transfer of territory was possible. Tajikistan lacked the immediate capacity or incentive to resist, and China was ready with a patient, long-term plan. The stage was set for a quiet comeback, one that would rely on diplomacy, history, and strategy, not military force. China's approach to reclaiming the Pomeir Plateau was anything but flashy. There were no armies, no ultimatums, just decades of careful planning, research, and patient diplomacy. Inside China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, teams of historians, cartographers, and legal experts pored over centuries-old Qing dynasty records, imperial edicts, and military documents. Every detail mattered. Maps, administrative reports, even old treaties were scrutinized to build an airtight historical and legal case. To complement the archival work, modern technology played a role. Satellite imagery allowed analysts to overlay ancient borders onto current terrain, confirming which areas historically fell under Chinese administration. Every mountain pass, valley, and ridge was accounted for, a meticulous, almost surgical approach to reclaiming territory without conflict. Parallel to this research, China engaged Tajikistan quietly and consistently. For nearly 20 years, behind closed doors, Chinese diplomats negotiated patiently, avoiding public attention or pressure. There were no grand announcements, no headlines, just steady, persistent dialogue, building trust, and demonstrating the mutual benefits of cooperation. Finally, in 2011, this long game bore fruit. Tajikistan agreed to a landmark border agreement, officially recognizing China's claim to over 1,100 kilometers of the eastern Pomeir Plateau. It wasn't a victory won with force. It was a victory of strategy, patience, and preparation. A demonstration that sometimes the quietest moves have the greatest impact. In 2011, after nearly 2 decades of careful preparation and quiet negotiation, China and Tajikistan signed a landmark border agreement. Over 1,100 kilometers of the eastern Pomeir Plateau were officially recognized as Chinese territory. And remarkably, it happened without a single shot being fired. This wasn't a case of coercion or intimidation. Instead, China offered subtle, mutually beneficial incentives, development aid, infrastructure projects, and economic cooperation. Tajikistan received support to build roads, improve energy access, and strengthen its economy, making the agreement not a loss, but honestly, an opportunity. Think of it like a chess game played over decades. China didn't rush to make a single aggressive move. Instead, it positioned its pieces carefully, analyzed every opportunity, and waited for the perfect moment to checkmate. Tajikistan, facing internal challenges and recognizing the benefits, agreed willingly. This agreement is a masterclass in modern diplomacy. It shows that influence can be achieved not only through military might, but through strategic patience, historical legitimacy, and mutually beneficial partnerships. What seemed like a quiet land swap on a map was actually the opening move in a much larger story, one that would soon reveal the true value hidden beneath the ice. After the 2011 border agreement, Chinese geological teams set foot on the Pomeir Plateau with, well, pretty modest expectations. They were prepared for cold, rugged mountains and nothing more, carrying heavy drilling equipment across slopes steep enough to make even seasoned climbers pause. The air was thin, the temperatures often plummeted below -30 degrees Celsius, and every step was a test of endurance. Most of the team assumed their work would simply document terrain and collect basic geological data, but within a few hundred meters of drilling, everything changed. They struck massive veins of lithium, the mineral that today fuels electric cars, stores renewable energy, and powers countless devices worldwide. To put this in perspective, lithium has become as strategically important in the 21st century as oil was in the 20th. Global demand has exploded. In 2010, lithium carbonate cost about $5,000 per ton. By 2022, the price had surged to over $70,000 per ton. China had suddenly discovered an industrial-scale reserve right in its newly recovered backyard, and lithium was only the beginning. Surveyors also uncovered rare earth elements, essential for modern technology and defense systems, from fighter jets and missiles to 5G networks and MRI machines. Among these were alloys based on promethium, some of the rarest materials on Earth, critical for aerospace engineering and quantum communications. These minerals are so valuable that control over them gives nations an edge in both economic growth and global power projection. Then came the most surprising find: gold. Preliminary estimates suggested more than 300,000 tons buried beneath the mountains, valued at over $170 billion at today's prices. This was a staggering figure for a region that, until a few years earlier, had been written off as inhospitable and unremarkable. What makes this discovery so remarkable isn't just the sheer scale of the resources, it's the timing and context. A land that had once slipped quietly from China's control without a fight now held the potential to reshape industries, fund infrastructure, and strengthen China's global influence. The Pomeir Plateau had transformed from a forgotten plateau into a geo-economic powerhouse, turning diplomacy and patience into tangible, world-changing wealth. Discovering vast reserves of lithium, rare earths, and gold was only the beginning. China didn't just extract resources and leave. It implemented a strategy of development over domination, transforming the Pomeir Plateau and the surrounding regions of Tajikistan. First, infrastructure became a priority. China funded and built a 2,100-kilometer highway stretching from Dushanbe, Tajikistan's capital, deep into the plateau. What once took nearly a week to traverse through treacherous mountain passes could now be done 3 days faster. Freight costs dropped dramatically, opening the region for commerce, trade, and mobility that Tajikistan had never experienced. Next came energy and utilities. Remote villages powered by diesel generators were connected to solar energy and hydroelectric projects, giving communities reliable electricity for the first time. Schools and hospitals were constructed in towns that had lacked basic services for decades. Children who previously walked hours through snow and mud could now attend classrooms in their own villages, and patients could receive medical care without traveling hundreds of kilometers. China also implemented a fair profit-sharing model with Tajikistan, giving 3% of annual mining revenues back to the country. While it may seem modest on paper for Tajikistan's fragile economy, this steady income stream became a lifeline. This approach contrasts sharply with historical colonial practices, where powers often extracted wealth and left instability behind. In the Pomeir Plateau, China combined resource extraction with long-term investment, turning influence into partnership. Through roads, energy, schools, and hospitals, China's presence became about collaboration rather than coercion, winning not just minerals, but trust and loyalty in the process. Even as development and resource extraction accelerated, the Pomeir Plateau faced challenges that no amount of infrastructure could fully solve. The region is one of the most ecologically fragile on Earth. Rising global temperatures are melting glaciers that have stood for centuries, swelling rivers, flooding valleys, and destabilizing permafrost. This isn't just an environmental concern. It directly impacts local communities, wildlife, and the very foundations of infrastructure projects. For herders who have lived on these highlands for generations, pasture land is disappearing. Migration routes for animals like snow leopards and mountain goats are disrupted, and native species struggle to survive. Meanwhile, the process of mining lithium and rare earths introduces its own environmental costs. Drilling, chemical processing, and soil disruption threaten delicate ecosystems that took millennia to form. China has recognized these risks and introduced mitigation measures. Green mining initiatives now use solar power to reduce emissions, AI-powered monitoring tracks soil and water quality, and environmental restoration teams work to repair disturbed land. Yet even with technology, restoring fragile alpine terrain is slow, expensive, and never fully complete. In some areas, it can cost over $5,000 per ton of soil restored. This tension between economic opportunity and ecological responsibility underscores a critical reality. The Pomeir Plateau may be rich in minerals, but it is also a living, fragile environment. Every development decision carries weight, reminding the world that even strategic success comes with hard choices and responsibilities. Today, the Pomeir Plateau stands as a symbol of strategy, patience, and long-term vision. A century ago, China watched helplessly as empires carved away its territory, unable to defend critical lands. Now, through careful planning, historical research, and quiet diplomacy, China has reclaimed what was once lost, without firing a single shot. The plateau isn't just a borderland, it's a hub powering industries, technology, and energy infrastructure. Lithium extracted here fuels electric vehicles and batteries across China. Rare earth elements support high-tech hubs in Sichuan and beyond. Gold from the mountains underpins major infrastructure projects and economic expansion. Even former Qing dynasty military outposts, once destroyed, have been restored as patriotic education sites, turning a story of historical defeat into one of national pride and inspiration. The region also embraces the future. In 2025, China launched its first solar-powered drone stations and charging grids in the Pomeir Plateau, signaling a sustainable, high-tech approach to development. Along New Belt and road trade corridors, mining trucks now move side by side with herds of yaks, a surreal blend of ancient tradition and modern industry. The real lesson? Power doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers. Roads, schools, grids, and partnerships can achieve what wars cannot. The Pomeir Plateau is no longer a forgotten corner of the world. It's a bridge, connecting history, trade, and influence, and reminding us that patient strategy can outlast short-term force. The story of the Pomeir Plateau is more than just geography or resources. It's a lesson in strategy, patience, and vision. From a forgotten highland once ignored by empires to a geopolitical and geoeconomic powerhouse, the plateau shows how quiet, calculated moves can shape the future without firing a shot. China's approach combines history, diplomacy, technology, and development, turning what could have been mere resource extraction into partnership and long-term influence. The region now connects industries, powers technology, and supports communities, all while standing as a reminder that soft power can be just as transformative as military might. So next time you think about global power or resource wars, remember the Pomeir Plateau, a frozen frontier that became a bridge between past, present, and the future. If you found this story as eye-opening as we did, like, share, and subscribe. At Cash Cow, we dig deep into the hidden moves, quiet strategies, and long-term visions that shape our world. Join us for the next journey into the stories that explain how the world really works.